personal advice, but if you have no budget as a startup, it might be a good option.
There was a company actually years ago, I can't remember the name, I think it was called like Law or something. It was like a $35 a month and you get access to documents and stuff. And it's interesting, like this is coming back, right? It didn't work that time, but that it's going to be offered again because there's a need for it. We're trying to figure out how to...
And I don't say this because it's self-interested, because my rates are relatively low compared to like my old jobs, but you get what you pay for with any service. And my wife, she's Israeli, so she negotiates everything, and so I'm used to that. And over the years, I told her, I'm like, if a fair price is a fair price, like you don't want to nickel and dime somebody because you're gonna get shittier service.
Yeah.
Like, there's a psychological price tag to over negotiating with somebody. So I think if you want to get high quality service, it does cost some money. It shouldn't cost an arm and a leg, but you're going to get $89 a month subscription service from a lawyer. I'm sure that you get something, but just think about, okay, well, how does that justify, like I'm really going to get what I think I'm going to get for $89 a month. So just knowing what you need and just adjusting to that accordingly.
So working with all these entrepreneurs, what's one common thing that you have seen with successful entrepreneurs? Like what's in their DNA or their kind of like philosophy that really you see that's common across all the successful ones you work with?
I think it's a good question. There are a couple of things. One is they're pretty centered, emotionally, spiritually, I guess in those two senses, so that when bad things happen, because bad things will happen when you're starting a business, they don't allow it to like push them off guard. Like they might waver a little bit and like have down days, whatever, but at their core, they believe in what they're doing, they believe in themselves and why they're doing it. They're just like, okay, well, I'm just gonna move on. So they don't dwell on things. Like they might get annoyed about something negative that happened on any given day, but they don't focus on it. They just focus on continuing growing, like, okay, not a big deal, I'll move on. And it works out because you look back a year from when something like that happened, or you forget about it. Or maybe you don't, but you're like, like, it's a laughing thing. And the other thing too is like, most of them are pretty optimistic and like just positive people. I'm a big believer in energy. I think if you're a negative person and you have a proclivity to just be, nasty or just glum or whatever, like you attract those types of people around you. You attract those kinds of energies around you. And so when I'm not saying you have to fake being happy, but like you have a more positive outlook on life. Look at the brighter things. Still be cautious and like smart about things, but just vibes, like positive vibes, good vibrations. That attracts more good vibrations, and now you're living in a pod of vibrations, which propels you to success.
Awesome. All right. Is there any other thoughts or philosophies that you'd like to leave the audience with, or founders that are here?
Yeah, go. Questions are better.
Oh yeah, we're going to go to Q&A right after. Yeah, just one.
Wait.
No, go. It'll help me jog my brain.
Okay. Well, I have 3 questions, but I'll just ask more. How do you advise startups when they're expanding in the U.S.? Is there a different set of legal advice that you think people should consider?
What's the context? Just like generally, or is there a specific? Because the reason I ask is because it depends on the country and like where you're and what business you're in. But so I don't know if you could share any specifics. I could probably be more specific.
We're already abroad, but we haven't sought. I just haven't sought legal guidance. And I just wonder, should I? If that's something that if someone's expanded abroad, is there a whole other list of considerations that someone should inquire upon once they have?
I mean, yes, most of the time. What kind of business, just generally?
It's a learning and development company with software that's online and in-person training programs.
Okay, I mean, yes, you want to look at, it's probably best to engage local counsel in those countries. So that, like, I think you should consider.
Even if it's virtual?
Even if it's virtual, if you're going to be targeting your sales and your customers in those countries, like it might be helpful to have like a tax attorney in one of those countries, or an accountant even. It doesn't have to be an attorney, but an accountant just to make sure you're complying with all their tax laws. An attorney, and a U.S. attorney could do this, but making sure you have proper privacy policy, because Europe is super anal about their privacy policies now, and so there are all these additional requirements. So if you're targeting companies in Europe or customers in Europe, you do want to make sure, because you might get your site shut down or fines and that stuff.
So, is there anything you want to leave the audience
Oh
with?
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess don't take life so seriously. Like, just try stuff out, and like, doesn't work, don't get bogged down about it, and just think about why you're doing it, and if the why is like a good reason, you'll probably be successful at something you do. It might not be the first thing, it might be, but if not, it's not a big deal.
So with that said, are you ever thinking about becoming an entrepreneur again, or have you?
I am an entrepreneur.
Well, I mean, like going back into a different business besides law, like.
Yeah, but I will say I don't think I'll ever go back into a products-based business.
Yeah.
Or at least physical products, maybe software products. But my vision is to start my own venture capital firm,
All right.
which I will start.
We might be looking for funding. I'll let you know. We'll take some questions. Anybody has any more questions? Anybody?
Just can ask me anything you want. Like,
Anybody? Okay, you had another one? Yeah.
ask as many as you want.
Well, I can catch you after. And
No, please.
But I have a million questions. Trademarks, do you recommend trademarks for every product or just for your company? Names, because you mentioned the name, and I was thinking, I thought that when you register a company, the state processes already go through.
No.
That's so
That's
bizarre.
false. You can get a company name, but you can get a company name in the state, like as, like Lichy LLC. But if you apply for a trademark and somebody has Lichy for those class of services or goods, like, you're not getting that trademark. So you can still keep your company name, but you can't use it as your brand name, like as your brand name.
Why don't they tell you that?
I think
So
it's
talk to the lawyer.
There's a disconnect, I think, now that everyone's trying to work towards streamlining it, but I think it's going to be a while before anything. Like she was saying, how come she doesn't know when she applies?
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Like, it should be a little
It's a
more.
great idea if anybody has a service business looking to get into some. Anybody have
But
any
just-
question? Oh, sorry.
Just with the question about products, or just the company name, do you mean like you have a line of products?
Yeah, should each product have their own trademark?
Like, what kind of products? Like a different.
Their learning programs, experiences for people?
Yeah, I always hate to say you have to, but you could, and if you want to protect the name of the name of different packages that you have. If you find that it's not just completely descriptive, but there's a branded component, then yeah, I mean, again, if you have budget for it, I would first focus on getting your brand name, like the house mark, so to speak. And then when you have more money, do those. Not the most pressing thing, but you could and should when you can.
Thank you.
Any question?
Patenting software. I'm developing a SaaS application for a service business. Now, the technology itself is not anything innovative or breakthrough. It's the application of the existing technology to some problem that I have that is, in the industry that I'm in. I've heard varying degrees. Is something like that patentable? So it's a design and it's a process. It's not necessarily the technology itself. It's open source technology. It's applied to a certain problem. Can that be patented?
I don't know. I'm not, and I say that kind of in joke because so patent attorneys, I have two guys who I work with,
Yeah.
or a guy and a girl, but two people who I work with who are patent attorneys, so I usually refer this stuff to because it's a whole different ballgame. You have to be a member of the patent bar, but potentially, from how I'm vaguely understanding, I know you don't want to get into too much of the specifics, but I think that certain elements might be patentable. Because you're going to have prior art and patents that exist anyway, so it is the application of it.
Yeah.
Okay. But I mean, that comes to a broader question of a lot of questions I get are about can you protect your business methodologies, which I think is a business misconception, which is you can't really, you protect trade secrets, but not so much your methodologies. And people think, oh, you trademark it or this, but it's more just like keeping stuff confidential. So be careful about disclosing business methodologies if you're not sure whether it's patentable or.
See, that's the dilemma. I'm trying to develop this application and offer it to a company that could probably build it themselves in half the time for, and they have the resources. So how do I prevent them from saying, oh, wow, this is great, and just sort of copy it,
So I get that question a lot because you can have them sign an NDA, but there's the reality that bigger companies with bigger pockets can just say, goodbye, and what are you going to do?
Right.
Unless you have money to fight them,
right?
you're kind of people get taken advantage of, and it
Right.
happens.
Right.
So, maybe you could find a lawyer who's willing to work on contingency and there's a big value, but it's unlikely. And so there is a risk with that, even with a tight NDA or confidentiality agreement. So, maybe you file a provisional patent first, which is relatively cheap,
Right.
just so you can claim some rights to it.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, it's a risk. It's like no amount of documentation is going to get around somebody with deep pockets if you have no money relative to them to fight it.
Yeah, two questions. One, you spoke a bit about the impacts of coronavirus on potentially new startups. So I'm thinking, what about, like, if an employee started working for a startup and because of the coronavirus they get laid off from that startup, what are some of the protections that employees going to have? And then also, what are two really cool stories that you have about working with startups?
Okay, I like the second one too. So the first question, I mean, it depends because it depends what the employment agreement says, but most likely they would be at-will employees unless they're like founders or executives. If you're at-will, I mean, there's not that much. I'm not an employment expert. I do kind of like base level employment agreements, but there might be some weird labor laws that might protect them with this. But if you have a contract and there's more than just an at-will, maybe there are some, but I expect that stuff like that might start to happen. So it'd be interesting to see how it unfolds. And your second question, I don't know, like if these are so cool necessarily, but like one company that I actually invested in, it was like my first foray into angel investing. We raised, it's a dating app. It's called Something More. It's like blurred images until you unblur it. So it's like that show Love is Blind, but in app form. But I met Adam, the founder, this last May, and we just met and we were just talking about what we do. And he was thinking of going back. He worked in the dating app space, and he was thinking of going into taking a job at, I think it was Goldman Sachs, like one of their new consumer divisions. They go, but I had this idea for a dating app, and he told me about it, and I was like, you should do this, and then we met, and then like 3 months later, he had never raised money before in his life, or started his own company, was able to raise over $1 million in seed funding from VCs and angels, and now it's an actual thing. So it was cool, and I represent him too, so he's a client. So to be able to see something literally from the ideation stage to getting funded, to being built, to now becoming like it's all over the press, that's probably the coolest one. And then I guess the other cool one is I was working with a co-living company. They're a client of mine that's 2.5 years since I started, and they recently asked me to join the board. So that was cool, professional. So.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Another dating app.
This one's different.
Oh, yeah. What is?
I have a question for you. So, are you familiar with partnerships with foreign entrepreneurs? Like, if I create a company here and I want to give equity to somebody outside of America, how does that work?
It's a good question. So it again depends on the country.
Well, let's pick a European country, like I don't know, Ireland. Let's say somebody I have a developer out there, is amazing, or she's amazing, and I want to give them equity in the company. How do I do that?
I mean, well, you can't do it in an S corp. So
It would have to be an LLC or
or no, it could be a C corp or an LLC, but you
Interesting.
can't have it be an S corp because you cannot have foreign stakeholders.
Okay.
So that's why S corp it's good if you have a small business and there's certain tax benefits, but if you're trying to like give equity to a foreigner, you don't want to do that. But I mean, honestly, it's generally the same. As long as they're not from like a restricted country, that is, it's the same kind of concept. I mean, the thing with that is they, if something happens, and this is with any kind of contract, to enforce your rights against somebody who lives abroad can be difficult. So it doesn't matter how tight your contract is, unless you have a ton of money to go after them in this other country. Something happens, you just want to be cautious because it's going to be very difficult to bring somebody into the United States. I used to work in litigation, and we dealt with this issue all the time. We were trying to bring these foreign nationals to come face the music, so to speak, in New York or in the States, and they don't come, and it's just this whole process. So I say be cautious with it, but generally the mechanisms are fairly similar.
And is there any programs to bring entrepreneurs to America? Like if I'm abroad and I wanted to come and live in America and start a business, is there any programs that you know of?
Yes, they're eluding me, but I'm sure there are a ton of them.
Yeah.
I'm sure Y Combinator attracts
I think so.
like foreign people. I don't know.
Any books or podcasts that you suggest to the audience?
My podcast, I just started, The Art of Starting Up, artofstartingup.com, we get a little plug. It's funny, I don't really listen to podcasts other than that, but books, 48 Laws of Power.
I read that. It's a
Did
fantastic
you?
book. Yeah.
It's one of my favorite books.
Yeah.
Like I read it a few times. Mastery, same author, Robert Greene. It's kind of like these historical anecdotal stories to give examples, but he talks about the journey from like being an apprentice to a journeyman to a master and just how other people did it. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Dale Carnegie, yeah. I just reread that, actually. It's a short read.
It's a short read.
Yeah.
They came up with a new edition for How to Win Friends and Influence People in the digital age, which is very interesting. It sounds like one of these bullshit self-help books, but it just like...
It sounds like an upsell at first, but then you say...
Yeah, it's helped me win friends and influence people, so it's a good book. And then...
upsell for s'mores.
What's that?
It sounds like an upsell for s'mores.
Yeah, exactly. And then, I don't know, I like fantasy adventures, so if anybody's a fantasy adventure person, Wheel of Time, it's like...
Wheel of Time.
Wheel of Time, all right. It's a 6 series, so taught me about life in my adolescence. Yeah.
Abraham Lichy, thank you so much. Thanks for coming, and grab some business cards. Don't shake hands, but say good night. Thank you all for coming. All right. Have a good night. Thank you.